Deputy Prime Minister Richard Marles has hit out at China after this encounter in international waters left Australian naval officers injured. But this morning, questions have been raised as to why it took so long to reveal details of that incident. For more, we're joined by former Army Colonel and security expert John Blaxland in Canberra. John, good morning. Thanks for your time. So this all happened when this Chinese destroyer operated its sonar device. What more do we know about the incident itself?
Yeah, Glendon, we know it happened in Japan's exclusive economic zone in international waters. It's not waters that you would have thought China would have been asserting itself in this way, certainly not in protection of its own territories. But we've known that Australia has operated in and around Japan and Korea for the best part of 80 years, pretty well uninterrupted and unimpeded. But we also know that over the last few years, China, I should say, has been acting in a way that's fairly confrontational, if not downright aggressive, using laser designators, using, pre-target designation signals, and now, of course, using sonar when there was a clear indication that there was likely harm to accrue from the use of such equipment close to an Australian warship.
So, John, I want to ask you about that because the Deputy PM has described it as unsafe and unprofessional conduct. Was it, though, an act of aggression?
So there's a couple of variables here we aren't sure on. How much of this is actually a mandated pattern of behaviour towards Australia from the top or from the naval hierarchy? How much of this is actually a bit of a tit for tat for us having a pact with Tuvalu? Or how much of this is a naval ship captain who's perhaps pushed the envelope a bit too far? We're not clear on that, but circumstances would suggest this is actually part of a pattern of behaviour, and it's certainly one that the Chinese leadership has been comfortable with and that hasn't publicly rebuked. Now, they're not likely to publicly rebuke them, but the fact that it continues, that this pattern of behaviour continues, suggests very strongly, I should say, that this is accepted and endorsed behaviour, and so it's totally right that the Deputy Prime Minister, particularly in his capacity as Defence Minister as well, should be outspoken
Which
in
brings
response.
us to this whole issue of timing. It's really important to note that the incident was 5 days ago. Of course, since then, the PM, Anthony Albanese, has met with President Xi Jinping. Did you expect Anthony Albanese would have actually raised it, or should he have raised it?
So it depends on a couple of variables. He may not have had a full briefing on the details. He might have actually pushed back on the initial briefing and said, I need more information. I think it's appropriate that he was probably cautious about raising this with the Xi at that occasion. So, there's some details there we're not quite privy to that I think we need to give the Prime Minister the benefit of the doubt in terms of the timing of this announcement. And let's not forget, we have now addressed it with the Deputy Prime Minister doing so. This is something that President Xi will know about. While it's interesting that Chinese have this great firewall, they don't let the people of China read or listen to foreign news, but their intelligence apparatus are monitoring us in detail. They'll be reporting back up the chain. This will definitely get through to the people in charge in Beijing.
One more from me, if I can. So now we get to this situation where we need to manage the situation. The opposition says it's not the act of a friend and wants a robust response. How carefully do we need to tread?
So really interesting, Clint, because we've got this conundrum. We're trying to get on with China because we're doing good trade with China, but we're also finding that they're behaving in quite an adversarial way towards us. So we've got this tension between these two, the security and the economic trade policy. And that's just the reality. That's the world we now live in. We're not at war with China. We don't want to be at war with China, but we do have to manage strategic competition. I would call that almost unrestricted competition. We're facing it in the legal domain, in the media domain, in the psychological domain, in the way foreign interference has been happening. And we've seen the government, to be fair, responding with a series of, both previous government and this government, with a series of legislative measures that are about protecting Australia, protecting us domestically, and actually with this announcement, pushing it back out there and putting it back on China. Very interesting to compare with the Philippines, who've been using the media to put a spotlight on this aggressive and really fairly obnoxious Chinese behaviour, particularly in the South China Sea. So I'm all about putting sunshine into these dark corners and exposing Chinese malevolence.
So interesting, John. We're thankful for your insight on